Our next speaker is Egon Zankel. Egon has been busy with no-till for 30 odd years. 21 years that he's physically been, his whole farm has been no-till. En hy seker dat die bekendste van die no-till ouens in ons hele distrik. En ons is dankbaar dat hy vir ons hier gaan deel. Hy het 'n nuwe plaas in Worden gekoop en het hy dan cover crops gebruik om die hele stelsel daar in plek te kry. So Egon is going to try and tell us where he had hiccups, what was good, what worked for him in his new farm, which he started developing in no-till in Worden. So Egon, thank you very much, and thanks for giving us the time and also sharing your whole no-till experience with us. Thanks a lot.
Hello everybody. It's a pleasure being able to share some more information, not because I get anything out of it, but a kick. I believe I'm a steward of what God gave us to be a steward of. Besides the kingdom business, but the land. The title of the talk then would be my Free State story. And as I often post pictures with a Vrystaat with a double exclamation mark when I send pictures to my pals. So we had this opportunity to purchase a farm in the Worden district. It's on the N3, 10 k's this side of Worden. And having arrived there and seen the potential in the summer with nice rains and everything, we eventually did the transaction and got going. Only to be faced with that. A sandier soil than what we're accustomed to at home. And practically, in my opinion, overgrazed fields. A lot of advice from people up there, kan nie dit and kan nie dat. I think at the end I'd like to be able to add sidar, as Maltino, the magician or artist, said. So we were faced with badly overgrazed lands, fields. I'm not going to go into all the other stuff that I thought was bad about it, besides like low phosphates. But being a staunch no-tiller and fairly hard-headed, I have a fair amount of German blood in me, I decided, no, listen, we're going to do this thing. And so we pulled in and decided it's the same planet, so we're going to do it like we do it in KZN. So fundamentally, that is now what we went into first year. I'd like you to pay attention to the progression, because these slides tell a story, and a lot of stuff that I'm not going to say is actually revealed by the pictures, and they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. I've got quite a few thousand words here, because there's a couple of pictures that just show the progression. So practically this was overgrazed. As a club, we've decided that you need 65% cover to do no-till successfully. Well, that wasn't 65% cover, but as we saw in the previous slide, if you notice the wheel tracks, these wheel tracks are where the planter turned and the tractor turned. It indicated that it wasn't a hard crust, and I just had the guts. I said, no, we're going to do it. Just like I did in KZN when I decided to do no-till. I was going to do it on 4 hectares to start. By the time we got to planting season, I did the whole farm. But this is about the Free State now. We have a single disc cutting ahead and a tine introducing the fertilizer into the same row, in line, followed by the planting unit. We have row cleaners on, because I believe after a cold, wet season here in KZN many years back, we decided to clear the rows to save them, the seedlings, from slug damage and to warm the path. That's where the Americans love to clear their rows, is to warm up the path and to have direct sunlight on the rows. So being odd row width to the previous owner's row width, there weren't many standing stalks after we'd finished planting. But like I said, we went in and attacked it like we do in KZN, in my mind thinking, same planet, it should work the same. And so that is some of the better residue cover that we achieved, or that was there in the first season. You can see the germination if you really pay attention, those soybeans haven't come up very evenly. Because even though I've done no-till planting, I've actually just dragged a no-till planter over a field. In essence, it's not a no-till system. So by dragging a no-till planter over a field, you haven't done no-till. You've just dragged the no-till planter over the field. No-till is the system that's got to drop from the head to the heart. It's a 5-year process, in my opinion, that you can't just jump in and pull a planter and say, oh, it didn't work, that no-till doesn't work for me, any better than you sleeping in a stable and thinking you're a horse, or jumping out of your bed one morning and deciding you're going to run comrades and saying running is not for me. It's a whole system that's got to build up. You've got to build up your organic matter. We've had some lovely talks previous to this indicating that there's a whole system that gets into operation. And I've seen it personally here in KZN. It's been a real eye-opener on below average soils. We're producing above average yields. And so we hit the Free State thinking, we're just going to go do it. That's now another field where we went diagonally across the old rows. We didn't want to have the seed unit hopping on old rows. Fairly sandy soil. If you are able to focus and you pay attention here where the soil is disturbed, you'll see fine little pellets. Now that's some of the plinthite that's showing from excessive tillage, and it's actually revealing the subsoil now. The topsoil's gone. We have added on some pieces and broken up some virgin land there. I don't like square lands when the piece next to it is fertile and deep. So we added on virgin pieces to these fields, and they are definitely not the color that we see on these slides. So when the soybeans grew, you can see there's a few gaps there, but it was as a result of capping. And capping is merely the lack of structure. So the impact of the raindrop, Richard, that was a brilliant talk, presentation in the beginning. That raindrop has impact and it destroys structure that's unprotected. Okay, but we had other things that were a little bit harder than raindrops. We had a hailstorm, smacked it. I'm giving you the whole story because it's not just a fairy tale, oh, here we go, and everything's, put a geranium in your hat and smoke it at the same time, sort of thing. So we had a hailstorm, and again, you can see the bare patches that were revealed, like that interrow there. There's no cover, and that is baking, and that would be a lot drier than a piece right at the bottom here, where there's maize stover covering the soil surface. Well, there was recovery, and the weeds came with, but not too bad. There you can see the crop maturing. This is obviously taken in the best area of the field. There were probably 40 hectares that season where we could not even harvest. We didn't even put a harvester in because it was devastated by hail. So it had nothing to do with no-till. I'm just giving you the picture that this is how it happened. We had a couple of Goliaths, August, but we never fear. God is near, and we just keep going. You can see the leftover stalks still standing from the previous crop. This field was also, generally the fields were overgrazed, if you're thinking with a no-till mind. Then we've got a piece that we called our Brazilian field. This was 4-foot khaki bush. One of the prophets of doom, when I got there, they said, no, this is a khaki bush farm. You're going to battle to combat the khaki bush. 2 seasons later, I don't think we've seen another one again. But this particular field was about 1 meter, 1.2 meter standing khaki bush. And there you can see the black interrow, all this material here. And that was standing dead khaki bush. We planted into it, and even my own staff from KZN that were helping us plant there started thinking I'm a little bit crazy. Anyway, that was the result that year before the hail. This was a field adjacent, which was just regular maize stover. The picture is taken where I could find the better cover. You've got to use your imagination a little bit, but where there was better cover, the crops looked a little bit better, obviously for moisture retention. and reduced capping. The crop produced and, well, looked pretty good. If you look at that, it looks pretty healthy. We grid sampled the fields for cash flow. Steve, Colin Brander. We grid on a 4-year rotation. So there's no ways you're going to go and buy these loads and loads of MAP, which was really short term. Some people weren't farming. I'm not pointing fingers at previous owners or anything, but generally, we as farmers don't do agriculture, we go into mining. That's when you're removing stuff from the soil without replacing it. So the real main input we had to put in was phosphate, and then to a lesser degree, potassium, and surprisingly, even lesser degree, lime. We didn't require that much lime, but the system is a 4-year grid sample rotation, and so the fields are sampled and then precision spread, and based on what we've experienced here in KZN, after 14 years, we decided our lime's blowing away. We incorporate the lime. We've done 60 hectares before here in KZN, but we're currently on a system of chisel plow type of operation where you're going to mix the soil and the lime, trapping the lime and protecting it from the winds. I thought I was in a wind belt here until I bought in Warden. I think that's where they left the oven door open. So the crop was good, and at this stage, it's probably going to have a foliar spray. This has probably had a foliar spray because we had a tractor-drawn sprayer the first season. So if I say it looks good once more, you're going to believe me. It was looking pretty good for that situation. And nothing could go wrong. Go wrong. Go wrong. We had a hailstorm, and usually after a hailstorm, the drought sets in. And that soil is obviously not that sandy, which possibly is an advantage. But that's just typical of what happened. It sort of recovered. It rained again after that, and there were cobs. This is obviously some of the better parts of the field. You can still see the hail, probably less hail damage on these. I could show you some horrific photographs, but it's got nothing to do with no-till now. What you need to have a look at too is the soil exposed between this crop. That soil is bare. And as Ray Archuleta mentioned in one conference in the States, it's naked, hungry, and running a fever. Your average temperature would be between 6 and 20 degrees hotter than a covered soil. Naked, obviously, you don't like to walk around with your clothes off, whether it gets hot or cold. And hungry. There's no organic matter feeding any of the microbes there. That's just a cross-section of the cobs that we reaped that season. Some nice, some smaller. There were areas with just about nothing, but this was a particular field that I just picked some cobs and had a look at what was to be expected. The first year we averaged, with the hail and the drought, we averaged 4.8 tons. I'm not ashamed to say it, that's what happened. Then I discovered that the area around us wasn't averaging that on conventionally tilled fields, and they didn't have the hail. The rumors going around the district was, yeah, since the Jews have pulled into the area, we get hail now. So with a surname like Zankel or Zunkel, they thought I was a Jew, but anyway, praise the Lord. So being a staunch no-tiller, and I've discovered that no-till is not no-till without a living root in the ground 365 days a year, we decided we're going to do cover crops. It's the same planet, Mos. No, but it's not done here anymore. You must grow your oats early when there's moisture, and you grow it for feed. Remember the beginning, kandidat. You can't this and you can't do that. So we took our no-till drill, which is a Pirabon double disc unit, nice precision planting, probably too precise for these sandy soils. Where it places the seed, it doesn't bulldoze a big furrow open, so you don't get nearer the water table, if you can understand me. It's planted at the correct depth, but high in the profile. And so, this particular season, we'd actually had 50 mils of rain after planting. And if you look, there's gaps. There's gaps. All those gaps, there was seed, but it actually capped. And so the oats battled to come through. You can see the cover that was on the field, and that is a field of soybeans. So there was a few stalks left over from the previous season. They're probably in the same condition as the day they were harvested way back 2 years before, or the season before. The soybean stubble you can't see because there was so little left after the hail. But anyway, we went ahead and put in the oats. The track that you see crossing this track here on the side is the tractor and wheat drill that we used to plant. It finished the field right at the bottom. Once it had all dried out again, we continued and it took shortcut out to the gate. It didn't help going around the headland because the wheels would still been in the field. And why I mention that is don't drive over your no-till fields. And that's a result of some of that cover crop. Not all the cover crops had radish and canola and stuff in, but we stuck some in to see what it would do. You're not going to know if you don't try. Obviously, terrible drought. This is 2 seasons back, remember? But anyway, the oats grew out and we didn't graze this particular field. And then we sprayed it with probably 1.8 liters of Roundup. And let's just say, here's the result. And there we're planting. Sort of diagonal to the old rows. I believe in that, and crisscrossing to spread the fertility, go across any standing rows that the unit will jump over or run on, and you get an uneven stand. The planter units ran silently in that soil. And that's after the first season. We planted the cover crops. So this is second season planting now. Bear in mind the first season, the picture I showed you right in the beginning, planting into beach sand looking situation, just with those maize stalks standing. This is a far cry from that. But the color of the soil you can still see is fairly orange and light. So it's just a close-up of a fairly poor stand of oats, but I think sufficient. What I couldn't put on here was a picture of the egrets. There was a massive flock of egrets following the planter, and that was to me an indication that they found something that they'd like to pick out that the planter's exposing. That's exactly the same field, and if you pay attention here at the base is the remains of that oats cover crop. Again, same sort of program, pre and post emerge, followed up with a foliar spray. That looked pretty good. And again, nothing could go wrong. It was about a week before tassel got taken out by another storm. Must be because the Jews have moved into the area. I could talk a long time about patterns and curses on time and whatever. It took me right back to my first years of farming, and how we battled and how I like to parallel my life with the cropping. What you need to pay attention to here too is the oats. Yes, it was fairly sparse, but there's hardly anything left here. So in the second season already, I noticed an increase in microbial activity based on the fact that the cover was diminishing under the standing crop. Skipping along again, this is the following season where we're planting our own row widths of standing maize stover. This has been lightly grazed, and yet I feel there's enough cover still to be planting into. We plant in between the old rows because, like I said, the wind sort of made up there. We thought we were in a wind belt here. So the standing maize residue from the previous season protects the young germinating plants from prevailing winds. It gets shaded late afternoon, early morning, and we find it, the seed unit runs very much stiller and steadier, running between the rows instead of over the rows. And the other advantages, of course, is we're planting with a bit of a tine, so the purists will say we're not no-tilling, we strip-tilling, whatever. But call it what you want. We're getting the fertilizer down in a zone and not in a hot band. It's distributed below the seed. These soybeans are planted with the same planter that plants the maize, and that is single disc up front with a tine introducing the fertilizer in the same row, and then the seeding unit coming behind. What we find up there in the Free State in the sandier soils is obviously less air pockets below the seed as a result of the tines. So it's a lot easier planting up there, and you'll see the stand is a lot more constant than the first year. I just can't remember how much rain we had after this, if it would have kept, if we had a heavy shower or what, but our stands have improved. And there's some maize. Our rotation is 2 years maize, 1 year soybeans. economics prevails, rotation effect. I know a guy says, why do we grow soybeans based on the figures? But I'm fairly hard-headed. It'll take me a few decades before I decide, no, it doesn't work. I'll really try and make it work. So simply the same system. The tractor wheels drive between the old standing stalks. You can see in this particular row right in front of us, it could have been a tractor track here. So we're planting right behind the tires, and that's important again that I mentioned the tires. We're using high flotation radial tires, which seem to be working all the years. That's what we've done. We plant a row directly behind the planter tractor, and it seems to be working. Same principle. Here too is quite a few stones. You get your sort of what the Americans call your hilltop ground. It's high-lying ground with quite a few stones and things. We didn't break any bolts or too many bolts, shear pins on the tines. We're effectively putting our fertilizer about 120, although in the Free State, if I can indicate, it goes this deep. It just sinks away. So we're placing our fertilizer a lot deeper. The planter just sits a lot deeper in the soil, although you can alleviate that with spaces on the rams, on the cylinders. Fast forward again to season 3. I'm not guaranteeing, and I'm almost sure that this isn't the exactly same field, but I'm showing you a picture that indicates that this could be taken in the Midwest in the United States. It could be taken on my farm, Rustenburg, here in KZN, but it's taken in the Free State. That's brown soil, plenty cover, and those fields have been grazed. We've built up material. So the questions come, and I hope to finish in time to field some questions. Can you build cover in the system? Can you increase organic matter? We haven't got back to regridding the field, so I haven't gone back and specifically measured our carbons and stuff. But here in KZN, we doubled our carbons in the soil within 10 years. And that's all about capacity. There's a nice stand of soybeans. Credit goes to my son Tyson. He likes to get down low with his camera and taking some really creative pictures. I don't think he had to look very long to find an ideal spot, because the stands have just improved that much. And having explained that we plant inter-row into the old rows, enough cover, we're already seeing the improvement from having enough cover and enough organic matter in the soil. Another thing I didn't mention was moving the rows all the time as you're getting equal root distribution. So that row of standing maize there, those roots will still be there for another season and a half or two, and all those little channels will still be there undisturbed, which I think is very important for infiltration and aeration. So this is year 3, and we're saying now, what's going to go wrong this year? It seemed to be growing well, same field, look at the cover. And this is the same season, but a poorer field. And I say poorer, what happened here that didn't happen in the other fields? If we look carefully, the maize stover is very sparse and very thin. And then if I could zoom this, you'd have to, if you can't see it clearly on the screens, use your imagination. Here where the pointer is now, there's a whole lot of those little pebbles, those plinthite pebbles, that's all I can call them. Little stones that in the previous season in another field where we harvested the soybeans so low after the hail that we had a fair sample of little pebbles in our soybeans, and they were being rejected at the silos saying it's got too much stones in. And I'm saying it's no till, there's no ways we're picking up soil. But anyway, it was in the root masses of the previous maize stalks that the combine was picking these things up and throwing them into the sample. That is subsoil. Now, I don't want to go into a soil science lecture here, but you can actually see how more compact that crust is. It's capped, and there's the evidence of the topsoil has blown away, washed away, just gone. So, same planet, we gridded and we spread our lime, and we fixed a field with a chisel operation with a nice basket behind it, and then we planted neatly. And there was a few clods, so we decided, no, it's nice to roll the field so we don't pick up these little stones in the next season. You all need to take a little moment now, and I don't mean get up, I'm not a general like Johan, but just pay attention to the floor tiles under your feet. That's what that field felt like after a heavy rain event. And this was our poorest stand of soybeans with exactly what you see there. Huge patches of compacted or capped soil where no soybean came through. I want to add that this was after an operation with a millipede, a spike-toothed harrow, to alleviate the capping. And they still didn't come through in places. Okay, it comes back to management. Our planting depth was probably a bit too deep for there. But after a year or two, you're trying to chase the moisture now, because once you've planted and you look again, that moisture's disappeared away from the seed. So we were chasing the moisture a little bit, and I think mistake rolled the field, so the capillary action would come up and the clods would disappear, but it capped. While we were working the field and fixing the contour furrows, I wouldn't just rush and take out all your contour furrows, by the way, because you get heavy rain events where it's going to run off, no-till or or not no-till. You need somewhere for that water to flow out safely and not take off your soil and material with. So in the process of preparing these contours and incorporating the lime that we'd spread that year, I noticed that in year 2, we already had all these little holes in the soil. Now you can see it's fairly fine, organic free, but free of not that much organic matter in the soil. But where this implement had gouged the soil, I noticed all these holes and some of the little roots that were stuck in there. So already in year 2, there was evidence of insect and other activity in the soil, which is quite exciting. And that's what we've now destroyed by going and working it again. But being a passionate no-tiller, just like here in KZN, we just decided to do no-till, and we just went in boots and all. What about, we'll fix that when we get to it. And that's what we're doing now on a 4-year, 5-year rotation. When there's hot spots and you have to incorporate your lime, we're going to do it, but we're going to leave a cover on the top, and we're investigating putting a seeding box on the implement to seed a cover crop immediately after or during our incorporation methods and operation. We've also planned to do this early in the season where you're harvesting soybeans and you follow the soybean harvester. So your grids would have been done the previous year so that once you harvest, your fertilizer and lime is already there and we're able to work it, incorporate the lime, introduce the seed into the ground while there's moisture there and there's still temperature to germinate it. There's some of the better stands of soybeans. Just continuing again, year 3, good cover, microbial activity, protection. Plants are a little bit healthier, they grew better, earlier canopy. Lovely stand of soybeans as you look across the field. And then came harvest time. We budgeted sort of 1.5. We thought we'd be doing well at 1.8 soybeans. Grateful to Dr. Philip Tienerson, who's done extensive work in that area. I bought his information, which has come in very handy. And so we've got crop budgets, and we looked at the stuff and said, all right, 1.5, 1.8 soils will be doing well. I don't know if these were going 3.2 or somewhere there, but we averaged on the farm, including those capped soybeans of about 40 hectares, we averaged 3 tons this last season with no stones in. So no extra weight. What's interesting here is you need to pay attention to is the spreader. You know, we all stare at the lovely header and the nice combine and big toys for big boys. Not that I'm that big, but anyway. 40-foot header. What's that, 9 meter? 10, whatever. It's a big header. But what's important to notice here is the spreader. The combine is able to spread the material. Okay, you're not going to get it right in very dry conditions and there's a wind blowing. But we're trying to spread the material behind the machine as wide as it's cutting in the front, because that's your seed bed. And so if you look at the seed bed that's left, even now that field is ungrazed, it's lying there waiting, there's not a weed in sight, nothing will grow in the drought. Even with a no-till system, when there's no water, there's no water. So if you're driving a Ferrari or a little Volksy, it's got no petrol, it's not going to go anywhere. Then we broke up a bit of ground and we decided, oh, this is naked, hungry, or not so hungry because it was virgin ground, but we did the necessary corrections and then planted oats into it just to keep it covered. Killed the oats, and there we're planting 60 and 80,000 plants of Pioneer 1184, which is not for up there. And I think that went about 11 tons. Not our best yield, but one of the best. Pay attention to the nice brown color and obviously the ground cover too. Same planter, single disc, fertilizing with a tine and seeding in the same row. That's a follow-up of when they were well grown. The aim here is to show what happened to all that oats. If you look in between here, that oats is practically gone, been decomposed. What I noticed too is that it would have decomposed quicker on this virgin land compared to an old land that's been in the system. Later on in the season, and all your chemical reps will focus immediately on a few aphids there, but I'm focusing on the health of the plant. We do implement a one fungicide spray program, and at the same time, to save operations, we put a bit of a foliar feed in, some macros and trace elements, and I think it pays off because of all the teaching, and I don't want to go into one of those now, but I believe the fungicide actually helps the plant to stay green. And I don't know if it's that, we don't have control in that because we've done our own trials before here in KZN and found about a ton difference. And I've got a long story to tell about a crop falling over under a center pivot, which I have mentioned in previous presentations. So we sort of simplified it for the Free State to a one spray program. And there's a pretty healthy crop and no hail. And this last season too, praise God, we had nice late season rains. And so we ended up with a lovely harvest. You look at that material, that's going in excess of 11 tons. It went pretty well. We averaged 9.9 on the whole farm, including a field. When we came to spray the weed program, my son Carl called me and said, there's nothing here, we're going to leave it out. Panic set in, and I said, no, we've got to keep it clean. Let's just keep it clean. And that field ended up realizing 7 tons per hectare. So including everything, 9.9 this last season. And well, glory to God. We just do our best and He does the rest. So then we thought, okay, the Free State used to grow wheat. Ward and Silos used to receive 40,000 tons of wheat, they tell me. And I go, well, where's the wheat now? I can go into a long lecture of what I think happened. But simply the conclusion to my digging and finding out and thinking why was the system was unsustainable. The cultivation and continuous cultivation of those fields to conserve moisture was actually introducing oxygen, which was mineralizing all the nutrients in the ground and the organic matter. As Ray Archuleta taught us, tillage in a trial that they did, results that they got from a trial. A tillage introduces oxygen in the soil, and it's like an atomic explosion. The bacteria multiply by 10 to the power 24 million in 24 hours. Well, the cartoonist could draw a nice mushroom cloud explosion based on that. So this is a field of soybeans. We decided instead of cover crop, we're going to plant wheat. So that's about 30 kgs of wheat planted with a Pirobon drill. If I had to look back now, I'd say maybe it was planted too accurately and too shallow for the Free State. You need a plant that's going to bulldoze a furrow and get more to the moisture. It's a field of soybeans. You can still see the maize stover from the previous crop. But it came up and it stooled and very ambitious. We planted a little bit early to catch the moisture and to get nice growth, and we needed a double crop. Then the frost came. There was a belt of black frost that came through from Ladybrand, Vicksburg, all the way through the Eastern Free State, and it took out all the main ears that had formed already. But, well, it's now definitely a cover crop. It's like your trading strategy, a short-term strategy gone wrong becomes a long-term strategy. Well, this became a cover crop at speed. Only to be surprised, the next time I went back, it looked like that. What happened? It resprouted, bringing back memories of the old generation that used to graze their wheat. And I said, that's stupid, man. I'd leave it to grow so that I can get maximum yield out of it. Well, what happened was the main ear was taken out, it resprouted, and it made a lot more ears than what was there originally. The little bits of Chenopodium, yeah, here's a nice one on the side here. We took out with a bit of bucktraw. It ripened, unfortunately ripened unevenly because now you had new stools, new tillers, and old ears. We averaged, on this particular field, we averaged 1.5 tons. On another field where we just ran and put cover in the form of a wheat crop after gridding a field, and it was lying naked. Well, it wasn't hungry anymore, we'd fed it. But a field that was lying naked when a cold front came through on the 22nd of July, we decided to go and fetch some seed, emergency. Spread it, cultivated it, and rolled. We got 3 tons off that field. But that's not on these slides because this is a no-till presentation, right? This wheat was no-till, straight. And some of the neighbors that weren't too nose out of joint with me would stop and climb over the fence and help and look and talk and ask and dig. And I looked at this lot and I said, if anything germinates here, it'd be like bonus. Anyway, we got 1.5 tons out of it. Being a passionate no-tiller, I said, no, we're going to continue this now. We brought the drill and we seeded a mixture of cover crop, realizing it's too late for the summer. We just went in with oats and radish, some babala stroke millet, sun hemp, and then in another field we chucked in some leftover soybean seed and some bit of sunflower that we got from the silos. Now that looks a hang of a lot better than some of the earlier slides. In this particular field, the first time we planted it, we planted 40,000 plants per hectare maize. And by the time it had come up, it was 25,000 plants. And again, the debate was, do we replant? And that word in my dictionary is obsolete. We left it, and it tilled, was actually Pioneer H56. It tilled so well that was our best block that season, with an average of 6.2. But the point I want to get is, when we planted that maize, it was so hard. Again, I'd like to focus your attention on the tiles below your feet. This is year 2.5, if you want to be correct. And I don't know if you can see any of that evidence of those floor tiles in this picture. In fact, I could have introduced the seed into this field with my pinky tip. It was that soft. Yes, the wheat does contribute to a hang of a lot. That's why I like wheat and oats and that type of cereal in the rotation, because it's a lot of root and it fluffs up the soil. And just look at all that cover. Remember, this was summer, so we lost the use of the field for summer crops. There you can see the radishes. The yellow, the plants that are appearing yellow are all the summer varieties. In other words, sun hemp and the millet or babala. This was not fertilized. We do not fertilize our cover crops. They're there to recycle nutrients as one of the benefits of cover crops, building organic matter, increasing biomass, and all the living organisms that go with them. Just odd visits that I paid to the same field. You can actually see the sun hemp now. It's a little bit sparse, but it started flowering just above knee height. And a nice stand of radish and oats. The winter cover crops looked very good, and this was now in the summer. Due to water restrictions and not having weaners at that time, we didn't graze it. This is that other field where we had some sunflowers in the mix. Biodiversity. Out there in nature, it's not one species. It's not grass out in the hills. It could be 120 species of plants there, each one exuding its root exudates, contributing to the little ecosystem underneath the soil surface. In short, those are sugars that are being put in the ground and building organic matter. It's actually carbon. Sugar is carbon. What's so significant about this slide? It's a harvested soybean field. The critics would say, oh, I've left potentially a few pods here because the header didn't quite pick them up low enough. But maybe the sensor wasn't calibrated sensitive enough for the combine to keep the same header height over this swell. If you pay attention, there's a swell in the land here. And if you lift your eyes even further, there's a boundary fence going over the horizon here. This is the remains of a boundary 20 years plus back. Now, why is that ground swell there? It's because the soil on the left and the soil on the right is gone. That's how exaggerated it is. This picture doesn't actually show it up clear enough as what you see in the field, that when you're harvesting, that the combine head takes time to come down because it's not adjusted and calibrated for a huge swell like this in the land. And with that, I'd say, well, where's all that soil gone? There it goes. Lovely picture of the sunset, red African sunset. Well, the sun's gone down now, but that stuff in the air there that makes these beautiful sunsets is rands and cents. It's topsoil. It's part of the skin that covers this earth that's got to produce food for the billions and billions of people out there. So with that beautiful sunset, that's the sunset of my talk. But I'd love to field some questions because it's an overview, and maybe there's some burning questions on your hearts that you'd like to put to me. The question is, did I rip before I started? No, because if I'm going to go and prepare for the squash season, I like to play some squash, or if I'm going to enter the Comrades Marathon, I'm not going to go to the orthopedic and the dentist, and maybe that's a poor example, but no. And I do want to add that probably my passion runs ahead of, my heart runs ahead of my head. And so I just went there and said I was going to do it. We've got time. The ideal thing would be is to go and dig profile holes, just like you go to the doctor and he tells you, or you tell him and he tells you back what's wrong with you. And then you fix what's wrong. So that's the long answer. The short answer, no. We pulled up some plants and we saw the roots were going straight down. I didn't dig any profile pits. When we go into a virgin piece, I've dug profile pits and found roots 1 meter down, grass roots 1 meter down. And that's telling me there's nothing wrong with the soil. If there's been anything, it's been man-made. So no, and I wouldn't suggest that one does before you go and dig profiles and find out what's happening in your soil. Just like you do the chemical investigation, whatever you do, the physical as well. How important do I think the animal component is? You're speaking to me now after having grown cover crops and introduced weaners, beef steers, as they say, to utilize the cover crops. But we've ended up grazing them on maize stover because the cover crops haven't done that well. And one big mistake I made here in KZN last year is we overgrazed our cover crops. Just because we had so many weaners, oxen, that we'd bought in to graze the cover crops. And because of the drought and that, the volume wasn't there, so we ended up regrazing some fields. Instead of just getting rid of the animals, which I would have done in hindsight, I think we paid in a lot. We lost a lot in our summer crop because of overgrazing the cover crops. But it is important. In theory, we're trying to emulate nature. And I'm not saying theory is that it's a problem, but we're trying to emulate nature. I remember standing at a farmer's day one day and I was asked a question about what's going on here when the termites were flattening these guys' maize in a bare field. And they said, no, we've got a termite problem, we've got to go back to ploughing, and that. Beware revenge tillage, by the way. Not having the answer, I just turned around and I always ask God for wisdom. And I saw the natural vegetation surrounding this field, and I said, I don't see a problem out there. Now, that's not the answer to your question. It's just the long way around of painting the canvas. We're trying to emulate nature. So if we find there's a problem in our fields, we've actually caused an imbalance somewhere. Because, like I said on that day, I looked at the veld surrounding natural vegetation. I don't see a problem there. And in nature, you have these vast herds of, like wildebeest and zebra, the great migrations. We all like to see them on TV. There are animals in nature. And if you said, I would have said this about 3 or 4 years back, I said, you're crazy. Because I went for 12 years without any livestock. I farmed very peacefully and we made a lot of money. But animals are a natural part of the system. And we're hoping to get some speakers for next season. I'm really going to punt it. And I know where Marlene's coming from. There's been a tour to the States where they visited guys that are introducing this fully. And that way, eliminating the use of insecticide, pesticide, fungicide, and fertilizer. That's, like I said, for another day. How would I incorporate animals? We do have animals in Warden. We have a beef herd that we breeding calves. We've got a commercial beef herd. And so they graze on the natural grazing surrounding the fields during summer. And then immediately after harvest, they will go onto the residue, the maize residue, And then in a normal season, they'd obviously utilize the oats and radish general sort of species that I plant in the form of cover crops. Here in KZN, we buy in weaners that will, in a normal year again, graze the oats cover crops and then be sold off again. One success story is about 2 years in a row, we marketed about 80% of those beef steers as a 2 off the oats. Having said that, the oats was seeding and they were gaining a lot of weight off the seeded oats.
I was just wondering, for the fact that you're doing rotation, do you see any economic value of the whole rotation where you, from one season to another, you were supposed to apply this carryover of nitrogen value? Do the use of, I think you're using oats, does it bring any economic value that you use less fertilizer with time?
I see value in rotation, not so much in the bottom line and in the cash flow, but the diversity that I'm creating in the soil. The oats I'll touch on just now. With soybeans and maize, it just shortens our season so that we can plant our cover crops earlier after soybeans. I don't like to disturb maize residue because once we do, the wind takes that residue away before the cover crop can establish itself properly. The oats is a whole different story. We stumbled upon it when we had a problem in KZN here where the maize fell over. We only reaped 7 tons on a centre pivot. Again, remembering beware revenge tillage. We introduced oats as a cover crop. Read a lot about it. I've got some time. I want to add here that there's certain subjects that come up and in our minds we like put shutters down and say, oh, that's not for me. Like when a tour group comes to my farm and they see a centre pivot, I already can hear the shutters going down. He's doing it under irrigation. It's not the case. We're doing this, even if we do cover crops under our centre pivots, the centre pivot does not irrigate the cover crop. So the cover crops we're doing is dry land. I just want to emphasize that. So the problem was emphasized on the centre pivot where the irrigated maize only yielded 7 tons. The surrounding field only realized 8.5 tons. It was a problem. So being a good no-tiller, staunch no-tiller, we didn't want to go revenge tilling. We introduced oats. We planted soybeans into that oats, which was an average crop. I think it was planted too soon after that. It's another whole subject. But after the soybeans, we had wheat. It was our best wheat crop ever. After that wheat, we had maize. And from 7 tons per hectare 2 years back, it yielded an average of 15.8. And a measured strip weighed officially was 16.3. You couldn't pull the roots out of the ground, they were so deeply embedded, and when you could pull it out eventually, they were white, and you could smell, the field smelled like silage, it was so fresh and juicy. So yes, the oats had a massive impact, but you can't say oats gave me a 7 or 8 ton increase. It alleviated the nematode stroke fusarium problem. The results 2 years after that was still seen in an adjacent field that didn't have the oats. There was still a 2 ton per hectare difference in the maize crop 2 years later. So that's why we rotated. It's important to us. If you didn't hear the question is, how do I come up with a recipe for the cover crop mixes? The short answer is, I use oats and radish because of economics, and they are what have survived these terribly dry winters. Bear in mind being very hot, very dry, and very windy. What would survive as well is turnips. I've had turnips in the mix. I'd love to, which I'm going to this next season, introduce cereal rye, which is meter, 1.2 meter, even taller in certain instances. Just different species. The dynamics here are in multiple species, and this is not from my experience now, but what I've read. There's a multitude of literature out there. Just Google cover crops, and you'll find yourself like I did at 11 o'clock one night, and your wife walks in and says, "What are you doing?" And I go, because I was right in the roots of some plant in the middle of the States, like totally blown. what's actually going on the ground. Simply, if you want to do a mix, it's got to be what you're targeting. If you want something to produce nitrogen, you want something to recycle your phosphate, you want something to build organic matter, you want something to fumigate your ground. So I grew 4 years of canola. After that problem, we went to canola instead of wheat and did irrigation. It wasn't financially sustainable for us, so I feel we're achieving what we try to do with the canola by growing oats and radishes in rotation. Your brassicas are generally known as your fumigants, and the veg and lentils and peas and that type of stuff, your legumes that put nitrogen in the ground. But again, I can carry on with lists and lists of stuff. You need to Google the stuff, it's out there, there's a lot of information out there. The mixes, I know a fairly nice, simple way of how to mix. If you're going to plant 5 species of cover crops, then you'll take 5, for the calculation, you'll take 5 plus 1. So you've got 6 in the calculation. So you've got 5 species of stuff, and you're going to plant 30 kgs of oats on its own. Then in the mix, it's 30 kgs divided by 6, which is now 5. So that's 5 goes into the mix, if you're getting the picture. If you don't understand it properly, I'm happy to explain it later, but it's not the recipe. No-till and conservation and all this stuff is not a set recipe, step 1, step 2. It's a principle you've got to get in your heart and go do what you want to achieve. Have I tried Sudan grass? No. I believe it's something that's going to produce a lot of volume for us. If I can be honest, I've lost a bit of speed with the drought, so I've just stuck to the cheapest possible seeds that we can find, and what's going to, in my mind, what's guaranteed to grow in these harsh winters. I've also not grown summer crops other than what I showed you after the wheat in Warden. So when you're growing summer cover crops, the world opens up even more, because not only the winter covers are there, but you can grow your summer covers too. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Angus, asseblief, ons... Nee, jy moet gestiek. Dit is net so... Baie dankie.
Morning. How was your night? Good. The giant of comfort. Is there something like that? So, what on earth are we doing on this little ball of dirt? My father died in April, and it's always good to, in a time like that, to reflect a little bit more. And this weekend I was sitting with my mother and just taking her out, watch some flowers in a makwaland. And then I asked her, I said, what do you think will we do differently if we were able to just go and visit that site for a while and then come back? What would our day-to-day look like differently if we are able just to get a little peek on that side? Now, Jesus was a specialist in many things, but the one thing he was not a specialist in was to create comfort zones for his followers. Jesus is not interested in our comfort. It's easy to say, I'm a Christian. It's much more difficult to live it out. And when Jesus says in Mark chapter 8, Jesus called the crowd together with his disciples, and he said to them, if anyone wants to follow me, he must deny himself. And the Amplified says it so nice, set aside selfish interests and take up his cross, expressing a willingness to endure whatever may come, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life in this world will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and for the gospel will save it. So Jesus didn't specialize in creating comfort zones for us. Comfort can be one of the giants that we're faced with. Our lives are geared to making it more comfortable all the time. Car manufacturers make the cars more comfortable all the time. We just try to make our lives more comfortable all the time. It's not bad in itself, but it can have negative impact. Now, David and Goliath. Comfort made sure that the Israelites stayed in their tents. I guess fear also had something to do with it. But every day they got suited up, they walked to the front lines, and from a safe distance they watched this giant roaring for 40 days. And every day they went back to their tents and say, it's more comfortable here in our tents. It's safer here. They had God on their side, but they were never willing to step out of their comfort zones and to face the giant. Not today. Too dangerous today. Maybe tomorrow somebody will come forward. Maybe tomorrow somebody who's bigger and stronger than me will stand up. So David stepped into the scene. He did in one day what the whole Israelite army couldn't do in 40 days. Every day, their comfort and fear got them to go back to their tents. David said, what's this? This is nuts. Let's stop this. This will end today. And David walks across a little stream and he faces a giant. Now God is challenging us this morning to look beyond our comfort and our fear. We are here on this ball of dirt for eternal significance. We're not here just to run a farm. That's part of it. We're here to be stewards of what God has entrusted to us. But there's bigger things that God wants to challenge us to get involved in. And farmers are get up and go people. If you were not a get up and go person and try to farm from your lazy boy, you won't have cash in hand, like the economist said yesterday. So I'm sure you guys are get up and go people. And God wants us to gear up for the battle and to join Him. Now what are we faced with in South Africa today? But also worldwide. It's not just only us. There are about, in Africa alone, 900 unreached people groups. Means less than 2% of the people groups in Africa do not have a Bible in their language, do not have a self-reproducing church, do not have people that can reach them with the gospel. So 900 unreached people groups still in Africa, after how many years of the gospel in Africa? But now something interesting is happening. And this is happening on a worldwide scale. People are moving. We could never send missionaries to Somalia. Their heads would be chopped off. Somalia is closed for the gospel. How many Somalis are living amongst us today? What is God doing? And how do we respond to this battle that God wants us to get involved in? Will our comfort keep us from engaging people who are different than us? How does God want to use you to bring people to Himself? I think when we are so comfortable and afraid of engaging people that are so different to us, we want to push people away from us who are different than us. We are scared to engage these people. I want to challenge you this morning. God is doing things around us. Are you willing to line up for battle and to join God in His battle? My story. I shared what I'm doing now with one of our supporting churches. I have to raise my own support to do my work, and I was sharing with a pastor in Tiger Valley in Muggenbean about what we're doing, and one of the people we're targeting are the Somali people. And I shared this with him, and we walk out of Muggenbean, we walk into a busy hallway with lots of people walking, and there was a bank bag lying on the floor. And somebody just walked, the guy in front of us just walked over it, and I walked and I picked it up. And there was $800 in this little bag. And the pastor said to me, he said, let's go and hand it in at info. I said, no, that's the wrong place. I said, our customers will arrive just now, just hang on. And I walked to the travel agent. I said, do you know of anybody who's lost dollars? No. I said, walk to the coffee shop. I said, if anybody looks for money, I've got it. Here's my number. And we stood around there sheepishly. And the next moment, the travel lady came running to us. She said, there's your customers. And there in the door of the bureau, the exchange bureau, stood two Somali guys. I mean, I just spoke about Somalis, how we want to reach out to them. What are the chances that I am the one who picked up that $800? So I walked to this guy, put my arm around him. I said, how much money is in this bag? He said, $800. I said, you're right. I said, but this money is going to cost you. He said, how much? I said, a meal at your house tonight. And his eyes became this big, and I handed him the money. I said, what's your telephone number? That night, 10:30, I was in downtown Belleville, visiting with the Somali guys. Now Abukar and I are WhatsApping every now and then. How are you, Abukar? He's still in Somalia. He's coming back to South Africa soon. It wasn't just chance that I picked up that money. God has got a plan with our meeting. Are you willing to step outside of your comfort zone, out of the comfort of your tent, and to engage people that are different than you, and to really reach people? Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, you have us down here for a purpose, and you want us to reach out to people with your love, to put our arms around people that are different than us. We pray that you will open the doors for us to do that. We pray that you will show us where can you use us in other people's lives. Father, help us to put our comfort behind us, our fear behind us, and engage in this war that you are in. And it's so nice to know we're fighting on the winning side. Amen.
Bye, donkey Angus. Thanks, Angus. The challenge, guys, please. He's challenged you, so take it up. All right, Steve, I would like you to quickly come up.
I'd just like to take this opportunity to once again apologize for Warren Parker not being here. And I'm sure we will enjoy his presentation via the media. And while I'm here, I'd just like to put out a few things to our sponsors. You guys know who you are. Johan will run through them later, but thank you very much for contributing towards getting this together. To the committee, who have all worked hard in pulling it off, thanks guys. I'd like to make a special thanks to Richard and Sandra, who undertake this project every year, and they do a great job. They've got the hang of it. So guys, Richard, well done. And to Guy, Elise and Deline, who have been their main help through organizing everything, thanks to those guys. To Drakensville, thank you for the facility. To Hayley and Jane and Sean for the music and the media, not the music, the sound and the media. Thanks very much, guys. And to the delegates, guys, thanks very much for attending, for giving up your time, for coming and learning, and for supporting what we all know is a great cause to secure our future. So guys, thanks very much once again, and please enjoy your day, stick around and stay for the gala dinner tonight. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Stephen. He's our chairman and running the show here. Thank you very much, Steve. Right, our next speaker is also Angus. It seems like the Anguses are full up here. Thank you very much he's a young farmer from Stellenbosch. He picked up a farm that was really down and out, and as a young entrepreneur and a young farmer, used a conservation tillage and the whole setup of conservation tillage to build up this farm again. Thank you very much for taking the time and coming all the way from Stellenbosch with a sore foot and all. And I hope you're going to be comfortable standing here. Thank you very much.
The first thing I wanted to say was that I was born in Guanabamba, which is down the road. I grew up in Escort. I farm in Stellenbosch. And the farmers' conferences in Stellenbosch is just a bunch of whiteys and a few colored guys. So it's really amazing to see the nation being built here. Congrats to everyone involved. The second thing is thanks to Richard for getting me to come and speak. Much appreciated. Yeah, I mean, if I could encapsulate what we try and do and why we do what we do, it's really this first slide. So this is my fourth job. I worked for Goldman Sachs in London for many years as a stockbroker. I used to sell equities, and you can't shake all your past existences. And so the whole issue on proxy is a financial term. So the principle of proxy is that you give someone authority to vote on your behalf. And when I say I'm talking about every citizen in the world is actually a farmer by proxy, because everybody chooses to eat, and accordingly they choose their farmer. And we're going to talk a bit more about how we farm. So the first thing I want to chat about is an issue of what I think are defeatist beliefs, the issue around sustainability. So we don't actually use the word sustainability on our farm for many reasons. One is that there are equal amounts of people in the world dying today of obesity and starvation. We lose 300 square kilometers of topsoil every single day. The relationship between farmers and retailers is totally unsustainable. Retailers extract from farmers. There's no farmer who paid himself a 1.8 billion rand bonus last year, and yet the biggest retailer in the country pulled that out of his shares in his company. Veganism and vegetarianism are also defeatist in that should the whole world suddenly become vegan and vegetarianism, there's absolutely no possibility of regeneration. And my talk today is about regenerative agriculture. And the great thing about agriculture is that agriculture has the ability to regenerate. The last thing on the issue of sustainability is what happens in our name every single hour of every single day. And that is 36 soccer fields or football fields of rainforest are cut down globally. So the rainforest, in case you didn't realize, is the lung of the earth. We all need oxygen to live. We cut it down to plant 4 crops, none of which nourish the human being, all of which contribute to human sickness and to the destruction of the earth. So I believe that agriculture should be regenerative, and agriculture has an incredible ability for regeneration. So here's some context about our farm. We farm between Cape Town and Stellenbosch. It's a wine farm called Spear. The farm itself is about 650 hectares. I've got 126 hectares under irrigation for pastures, 21 hectares of vineyards. There's some areas where we graze in winter, when we have winter rain. This year we've had 240 mils of rain. We're supposed to have 700 mils of rain. It's the third year that the Cape has had less than half its normal rain. So there are going to be a lot of Western Cape refugees coming to the rest of the country by the summer. Because Cape Town will run out of water. The city of Cape Town is going to run out of water, and it's going to be a very ugly situation. So I digress. I have been farming for 8.5 years, and we started taking Brookside lab tests in 2011. I just couldn't fit it all into this onto the slide, but the picture is much the same. Our organic matter increases, and everything else increases. Now, we are very happy to have an organic matter of 1.87% because it was 1.32. But for you guys, I'm sure that you'll feel like you're farming in desert sand or beach sand with this. And then you can look at the micronutrients. The percentages on the right-hand side is the percentage increases in micronutrients. And that's chiefly due to 2 things: the rotational grazing that we practice and the fact that we stopped using glyphosate, which was patented the first time in 1964 as a chelator, which is a descaling agent. So it's brilliant at binding up micronutrients. What we do on the farm, and I'm going to show you a whole lot of slides now and pictures of what we do, but basically we slaughter 4 cattle a week. Unfortunately, we don't have an abattoir on the farm. We've got our own butchery on the farm. We kill 5 of our pigs a week. We process 400 broiler chickens, and we've got 4,600 laying hens in what we call eggmobiles. I'll show you pictures of those just now. So I've come to experience that farming, in my experience, I apply what I call the 50% rule. And what I mean by that is that farming is 50%, and I can only talk from my own experience, it's 50% production and 50% marketing. And in order to avoid the crush of the national retailers, we have a direct relationship with our end consumer. This is one of our chefs. We just started the pig operation last year in June or July. On 9th of June we started it. She came to come and meet the pigs and obviously now loves buying our bacon. The other thing to do with marketing is a website. It's an Instagram feed, it's a Twitter feed. A lot of people are like, I just want to farm. I don't want to be marketing. I love talking, so I'm quite happy to market. But if you're not prepared to market, you're going to end up being a price taker, not a price maker. So my website is farmerangus.co.za, same on Twitter and on Instagram. We have clients, we have farm tours probably almost every day. People come and visit the farm. Okay, so I'm just going to go through a few slides on the production side, and then we'll talk about again and more on the marketing side. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Alan Savory's work, mob grazing, high density grazing, whatever you call it. The principle behind it is very simple. A lot of animals in a small space for a short period of time. We move our cattle 4 times a day. We move our pigs every 3 to 4 days, depending on how effective they've been at turning the soil. We move our chickens every day, 365 days a year. So it's been a real adaptation for our staff, a lot of whom we've worked on vineyards. Now, if a viticulturalist is working for 4 months of the year, he's working very hard. Okay? I know because I produce grapes that get made into wine. So the problem in the Western Cape, in Stellenbosch, is it became a monoculture of grapes, and these guys didn't really work for 8 months of the year. So we've had to recalibrate people to understand that ours is a 7-day-a-week, 365. New Year's Day, Babalas, Tuesdays, doesn't matter, public holidays, everyone's there working all the time. Because our animals expect to be moved and fed, well, as I said, every day, and the cattle 4 times a day. Okay, so this is just to give you an idea, the electric fence, the before and after impact. We wait 6 weeks before we graze the area again. If we're lucky enough, we can wait longer. We have, again, it comes back to the water thing, I'm sorry, but the water thing is a real crisis for us because ourselves and about 5,000 farms have been dependent on a dam called Tewaterskloof, where you have water, which is almost for free. You're paying about 1,500 rand a hectare a year, and it's under pressure, so it comes out the pipe at 5.5 bars. No electricity pumping costs nothing. And this has been the play in the Western Cape for the last 30 years, until this year. So we've had to shrink our operation. Everyone's sinking boreholes like lunatics, trying to get dams, etc., etc. So one of the principles that we believe is integral to regenerative agriculture is the principle of farming biologically as opposed to mechanically. Now, obviously, there's a lot of times where you can't farm biologically, you have to farm mechanically, but there are certain examples of it, and this is an example of it. This guy called Willie, who's involved in soil conservation, was visiting the farm and he was admiring the free choice mineral lick. So the free choice mineral lick, which we have this is the one for the cattle, we have it for the pigs and for the chickens. The principle is very simple. All soils are deficient. All plants growing in the soil are deficient. The animals eating that plant will be deficient, and deficiency manifests as disease. And our cattle in particular, we are incredibly blessed that we do not have to bring any food from outside. We don't have to bale. We used to have irrigation water in summer, so we would grow in summer. In winter, it's supposed to have rained, so we would have grown food in winter. But we don't have to bring in any food from outside. So my cattle are entirely dependent on what they graze in the pastures and in the velds, and so the soil deficiencies are a big problem. So what we've got in there is a wagon that is pulled with the cattle. Got 23 different minerals in. I've got a story on my website on the exact minerals that are in there. They are all purchasable at the carb. One of the keys is the salt. We are very specific that we use unwashed salt, because as soon as you wash salt, the sodium chloride content goes up and the mineral content goes down. So we get unwashed salt from Khoisan. We've got a brilliant aquifer and combined with the dehydrated seawater. So the principle is, what happens is the animal has this ability to know what it needs. Okay? it pushes its nose where Villy's got his hands, so they push the conveyor belt up, moves up and down, licks what it needs. 30% of the mineral fixes the internal imbalance, 70% comes out the back end, biologically available. And that's very important. Because when you're putting lime or potassium or whatever things, which we tried before, putting it out through the tractor, it's not biologically available. It hasn't gone through an animal system. And of course, tractors compact the soil, tractor drivers are babalas, certainly down in Stellenbosch. Tractors cause wear and tear. They're expensive to maintain. And the cattle that are doing the same job as the tractor, I can eat when they're finished working. The other thing that we use this free choice mineral lick for is to sow our legume seeds. Okay, so we have, in the one, we've got the salt and about 15 types of legumes. So what happens is the animal licks the salt, the legume goes through the rumen without being broken up, and every time they're dunging legumes out. And that's the result. Okay, so that's got white clover in it. In the front is some veg, there's crimson clover, there's lucerne in there, but obviously isn't in flower because this is a late winter shot. The one observation on legume seeds is we planted our first pastures in April of 2009. And every time I've gone back to the seed company to either buy legume seeds for the salt lick or planting more pasture, the cost of legumes has just gone up. You know, it's 6,000 rand a bag of red clover seed now. So a principle that we talk about a lot is stacking. So the guy who's inspired me to farm is a man in America called Joel Salatin, S-A-L-A-T-I-N. And Salatin talks about stacking. So the principle of stacking is a very simple principle. You try and get as many sources of income from your piece of land as you can. In the case of our pastures, we're getting beef, we're getting some lamb, meat, chickens, eggs, pork, and the last thing is carbon credits. We were paid for carbon to be stored in the soil. I'll talk about that later in the talk. But the idea of stacking, and you know, this is a discussion I'm having with the wine farmers in the Cape, is that they're planting cover crops like crazy. And then instead of making a plan to harvest the red clover seeds and sell it for 6,000 rand a bag, they herbicide it. Let's talk about the marketing again. My experience in farming is 50% production, 50% marketing. We used to actually call our stuff pasture reared, which is ironic that I'm wearing this t-shirt, but then we stopped it because people were popping up in different places in the country going, I'm doing pasture reared, I'm doing pasture reared. So then we decided to personalize it. Now, the terrible thing is my father named me after a beef breed. So everyone thinks that this is Angus beef, and I don't want to offend Angus breeders, but breeding with Angus is like breeding with goats. There's really not much meat on an Angus carcass. So our story with our beef is very simple. We're at the holistic, ballistic end of the spectrum. It's pure grass-fed. They've never had a grain in their lives. We try and tell as much of the story as we can in our packaging. The biltong, which is top left, you know, the biltong, I'll talk about how we package the biltong just now. There's a huge exercise we've gone through in the last almost year, I guess, and that is to get our product acceptable for retail, because that's what the big guys do. They crush the little guys by saying you're not labeling your stuff properly, and the labeling requirements are pretty onerous. Anyway, so this is just some of the beef products that we have. This is one of our latest products. It's double smoked bacon. We are currently the only butchery in the country producing processed meat that has no nitrates and nitrites added. So it's the front and the back is, as I was saying, all the legal requirements, all the allergens, barcodes, etc., etc. And again, it's a lot of work, this, but it enables us to be one step closer to the end consumer, and therefore the retailer gets thinner, not fatter, at the expense of us. I talked about the biltong. The biltong is flushed with nitrogen. Nitrogen is a preservative, so that biltong is room temperature stable for 3 to 6 months. But the problem with this is you've got to buy 25 kilometers of plastic to get the packaging made and printed for you. So the economies of scale are very much stacked against the little guy, which is why collaboration with farmers for products is so important. Another part of the 50% rule on production is to try and maximize your products that are normally thrown away. So this is Petsmans. Okay, you can't believe how the Cape Townians go nuts for Petsmans, which is organ meat. So this is normally organ meat that either the abattoir buys from me at super cheap, But now I can turn it into a product that's actually really good and goes well. Along the same line of thinking, we, about 2 years ago, started making a thing called bone broth. And of all the products that we make, this is the single product that just we cannot make enough. And we can't make more because we only kill 4 cattle a week. But it's an incredibly popular product. We put people on allocation and we courier it around the country. And the couriers are starting in early November already. That's how long the waiting list is for this stuff. And it's easy to do. And what do people do with bones? They throw them away. Okay, so back onto production and principles. This photograph was taken in early January, because the lucerne is in flower, the purple flowers. Our experience of lucerne, and we're very blessed that it grows incredibly well on our farm, is touch wood. We haven't lost any livestock to lucerne, and that's because we're fortunate enough to graze it when it's in flower. So the plant goes from vegetative stage to reproductive stage, and chemically it changes. So when it's in its reproductive stage, which means it's flowering, it's absolutely fine to eat. I'm not an animal scientist, and I'm just talking from my own experience. So the principle here of everything being movable is really important to understand, because so-called free-range farming, which I'm going to digress a little bit, is a complete bullshit story. The most egregious example of the abuse of consumers, which is us, by the free-range, is in the egg industry, which is a proper collusion between the retailers and the egg industry, because there's nothing free-range about those chickens at all. In fact, there's an avian flu epidemic in the country at the moment. So every single so-called free-range operation, those doors are locked, those chickens are never going out. So free-range, unfortunately, the problem with free-range is there's no certification of it. So anyone can stick a free-range label on. Everyone can stick a natural label on. And in fact, most people can stick an organic label on, but by law, in theory at least, you're not supposed to call anything organic unless you're certified. Okay, so the principle of movability, I come back to. Because if you're moving your livestock and you're waiting for the parasite cycle to break, then you're just taking a huge amount of stress off. Now, 90% of antibiotics in this country are issued into confinement animal feeding operations. Partly as a growth promoter, but also because those animals are in touch with their manure all the time, so they're under massive disease pressure. We move our chickens every day because if they don't move every day, they overgraze the pasture. My 4,600 hens graze at least as much as 120 head of cattle. They will over-fertilize the pasture. If you remember, Omar's backyard looks like concrete because the chickens have lived there forever. And we also give our chickens fresh pasture every day. So when you break the eggs open, the yolks are super bright orange because of the beta-carotenes and the chlorophyll in the grass. Caged eggs, which is 96% of the market in South Africa, have an additive in the feed to color the yolk yellow. And our clients, this is all the stuff that our clients want, and that's what they come to the farm for. Again, things are movable. In the background, you see some electric fencing. That's an older iteration of electric fence. We've now learned that the pigs need a double layer of electric fencing, both on the horizontal plane and on the vertical plane, so we've changed that. But directly behind them, Zukizi and Vincent, are our drinking systems for the pigs. So you'll see one of the pigs is having a go at the bite nipple, and it's bent in. And the reason it's bent in is that when it comes time to moving, we can disconnect it from the Gecko coupling, turn it on its side, and roll it to the next paddock. And pigs, as those of you who farmed with pigs know, are the most destructive animals. They are unbelievable. I want to touch on the issue of waste streams. Now, waste is a human construct. Nature doesn't waste. It's only us and our cleverness who waste and foul our own nest. So one of the things that they waste in our area is whey. There's a huge feta cheese factory up the road from us. They're dumping thousands of liters of whey a day. We don't capture all of them, but we've captured quite a bit of them. One of the gifts that I have on the farm, inheriting a chemically farmed farm, is this weed called ramnas, which is a radish, I think, in English. And the traditional way, obviously, is putting the bosikapper in and cutting it and then leaving it on the ground. But we've put 271 cattle in, and the photograph's taken from the same place. So, I mean, you can read on the top what happens. Again, stuff is the nutrients that ramnas has mined are now biologically available, as opposed to taking a long time to break down. normally. And if you've got 1.86% organic matter in your soils, you don't have many critters in the soil who can help decompose things. And our belief is that every business needs to stand on three legs. The finance being the most important, because obviously everything else won't matter if you can't make money. The second is your social work, and the third is the environmental effect. So socially, we 3 times a week, we get together as a group, we sing, we play some games, we stretch, we say our names. And we've also started of late, once a week, someone tells their story, and it's been fascinating to hear the stories of our folk. And we've got folk from, we don't mean Somalis, August, but we've got Malawian folk, a lot of Zimbabwean folk, Xhosa, Zulus, colored folk, a few Mlungus. Yeah, that's about it. We haven't gone further north. We do have, from time to time, got some foreigners who come and intern on the farm. The other social thing, and I need you to look very carefully at these two photographs. Okay, so focus on that photograph, and now focus on the next photograph. Tell me what you can recognize from both photographs. I'll do it again. That photograph and that photograph. Same guy, perfect. Okay, so this is our butcher. He's 70, he'll be 73 in November. This is when he started cutting meat in 1960, and that's him, well, that's him 2 years ago. So our view on social work is that, our view is that it's a great illness in society that the older people are shifted off into retirement homes. When people become really interesting, experienced, valuable. You know, Spencer doesn't work 5 days a week, he works 3 days a week. But we still have that input of him for 3 days a week. And, you know, I think it's symptomatic of a deeper malaise in society where we live in a reductionist culture, where everything is reduced and reduced and reduced, and we've lost the context. And in a sense, we've lost a lot of community. I referred earlier to carbon credits. We were the first beef farm in the world, and the first farm in South Africa to be paid for carbon credits. Basically, the carbon content in the soil had increased. We went to a carbon registry in Cape Town. They put it up for sale. The deal was 50% of the net income, that's post-auditing, comes to me, and 50% comes to my staff. So these were all the staff in December when we shared out the bonuses. So we're hoping to do, you know, we're not going to do it every year. It's just absolutely exhausting, taking soil tests. But it's just a nice little extra source of income. We don't ever plan for it as an income, but it's one of the possibilities when you stack regeneratively. Okay, so one of the main reasons people like our products is that we, as a rule, avoid glyphosate. Now, I realize that glyphosate is the 13th apostle in this congregation, so I'm treading on very dangerous ground here. Okay, but this guy who's giving this lecture, I just took a photograph of his thing. His name is Terry Vrain, V-R-A-I-N. He's a retired molecular biologist. It's a very interesting life story, but he does a talk, 33 minutes, on how glyphosate works and why it's so effective and why it is the Floyd Mayweather of agricultural chemicals. And because it chelates and binds all the micronutrients, and because South Africa is the only country in the world that his staple diet is produced in this method, every South African is walking out with a micronutrient deficiency. And what these guys did in the States, and they can do the same here, I'm sure it's the same, is they went to the USDA and they went to the Center for Disease Control, and they just mapped these things. Okay? And I mean, those statistics are practically a statistician's wet dream, and that's as close to 1 as you're going to get. And this is self-explanatory. Minerals go down, diseases go up, and then of course, after glyphosate comes dicamba. Yeah, because once you start using these guys, you've got to use stronger and stronger chemicals because the weeds become resistant to it. And I don't know how many of you follow the dicamba drama in the US, but in essence, they've planted over 20 million acres, and more than 3 million acres outside of the 20 million have become contaminated. And it's a brilliant weed killer. So environmentally, the clients like our story because they feel that we're regenerating the soils. And this slide shows that. So in the foreground, it's dark green. In the background, it's pale yellow. There's some poles running across the middle of the picture. That's a road. The pigs have only ever been on this side, it's actually the west side, but it's closer to you, and not on the other side. And in our soil tests, which the latest ones which I took in April and May, the Brookside results came back, and there's 24% more carbon in the soil on this side as opposed to the other side. Okay? The other thing that we use the pigs for is to replant the pasture. So what we've started doing is we go to the seed company, which is Agricole. They're awesome guys. You really do a great job. They, in the foreground, sort of half away across the picture, the pigs were there. So what we do is we take the sweepings, whatever sweepings we can get. Whilst the pigs are in the area, we chuck them around. The pigs try and eat some of them. Most of them they trample into the ground, they defecate, they urinate, and then you have this regrowth. And of course the cattle absolutely love it because there's great fresh pasture for them. Brown grass, as an aside, is Eragrostis, which I'm told upcountry does brilliantly, but for us it's been an absolute curse. They call it, in Stellenbosch, they call it whole uittrek gras, because when you try and pull it out, something pops out the back end. So we have tried hard to control it. I mean, we've mob grazed it very heavily. We've hit it with a bossiekapper. We've actually tried to disc it. We've tried to burn it. But the pigs are the pigs are the master of it. So we're very happy with the pigs. So I'm a management accountant by training. I've got an honours degree in management accounting. I'm a member of the Institute in London. In all the years that I've been involved with accounting, I've never heard people talk about true cost accounting. And I think that's a problem. And so there are many examples we can use of true cost accounting. But if that beef was truly costed, in other words, if the antibiotic resistance that you get for free was in the price, if the inflammatory diseases you get for free because there's too much omega-6 was in the price, if the environmental destruction of the way that animal is raised was in the price, if the environmental destruction of the way the animal's food was raised was in the price, that steak would be multiples more expensive. And it's my belief that until our education system becomes more holistic in its thinking and less reductionist in its thinking, that we're just going to continue down this path. You know, I've got one of my children is just in grade 8, and so his high school is now doing physics. And I've never understood why physics, chemistry, and biology have to be dealt with separately, because in nature they always function in unison. Anyway, so now he's trying to get his head around a thing called Boyle's law, which is all about pressure and volume on condition that temperature and pressure, it's pressure and volume, and on condition that volume and temperature remain the same. Where in nature do you ever have those variables remaining the same? And so I think we've got a deeper challenge than just how we farm. And I want to end off where we started again to say we're all farmers by proxy, and we can encourage regenerative agriculture by using our fork. Okay, so that's my official part of the talk done, but I do want to just thanks Sean, show you a document I got. I called Gabe Brown. So Gabe Brown, Gabe-Brown. The significant thing to look at is this chart. And if you look at, he's comparing himself and some of his neighbors. Okay? There's organic, there's no-till, low diversity, no-till, medium diversity, high synthetics, and then no-till, high density, no synthetics, and livestock. So he's the bottom one of the livestock. Okay? And this whole article is, can we regenerate our soils? Because Brown has 2,100 visitors a year who come to his farm, and practically everyone says to him, Gabe, oh, it's awesome what you've done here, hey, but my soils are different. Can't do it in my place. Okay, so that's the story that Gabe goes. He says he'd be very rich if he got a cent every time someone said that to him. But he compares these things, and the critical thing for him is bringing livestock. He's been no-till since 1993, and he's done this to his soils, but it's because he brings livestock in. Because he says he believes in thinking of systems. So the next person he talks about, and he says it here, in my opinion, the ultimate system is Colin Seiss. Colin Seiss, again, another guy to look up on the internet, is fascinating. He does a thing called pasture cropping in Australia. So Colin Seiss, you seed annuals into perennial grasslands. That's what he does. Okay? And Seiss will talk you through the economics of it on a fantastic level. The yields, the return per hectare, etc., etc. So Colin Seiss's soils, that's what's happened with Colin Seiss's soils. Okay? You can just look at the percentages increase over time of carbon, water holding capacity, and then all the micronutrients and macronutrients, okay, through pasture cropping, also no-till. And then I really like this picture. I wish it was taken on my farm because you can see the beach sand, but it's not. It's on Gabe's farm. And you can just see that no-till in sand also works. That's the carbon that is built up, but through the judicious use of livestock.
Hi, Angus. That's a bit loud. Thanks for that. Do you deworm your cattle at all?
Oh, yeah. So I'm actually meant to talk about the cattle health.
Sorry, can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
Have you heard any negative impacts of using something like ivermectin and that passing through the animal and having a negative impact on the soil biology?
I meant to add, when I had the slide up of the free choice mineral lick, that in 2016, which was the last kind of year we were at full capacity because of the drought, in 2016 we had an average of 300 head of cattle on our farm, and we dosed once with antibiotics. And I ascribe that to the fact, one, that we're moving them 4 times a day, and the second, that they have this free choice mineral lick, and they can genuinely medicate themselves. Some people call it cafeteria minerals. You're giving the animal the choice. Now, I'm not having a go at the guys who make the lick blocks, okay? But the lick block, there will be certain things the animal doesn't need in the lick block, and then gets too much of it. Here, you're giving the animal the free choice to choose its own thing. As far as the parasites go, touch wood, we don't have to deworm. We do check the dung from time to time. We had a liver fluke problem at one stage, and then we gave them a spoon of copper sulfate each. And they hated it, but I tell you, it took away the liver fluke. But in one of the free choice mineral licks, so on the screen, you've got salt and legumes. Then there's the second one. I'm going from the top down. The second one is half diatomaceous earth, half kelp. Kelp has the full mineral spectrum in, and diatomaceous earth is brilliant as an antiparasitic. Then the next one is called the Pat Colby mix, C-O-L-B-Y. She's an Australian lady, and that is 2 kgs dolomitic lime, 1 kg kelp, 1 kg copper sulfate, 1 kg sulfur dust. So I think that all of those, and then I can talk about the others, which are 2 calcium, 1 phosphorus, but it's all on the website. I don't want to go down there. As far as the ivermectin stuff goes, I'm not a microbiologist. I don't understand that, but my understanding would be that if it kills microorganisms, it's also going to hurt the microorganisms in the soil. I went to a talk quite a few years ago where a guy called Reg Jellerman gave his talk. Now, he farms cattle in red water and hot water areas. He puts no porons on, but he feeds them a probiotic he makes from his earthworm castings. You know, because we live in very benign cattle country. I mean, I think there's been 1 case of each of those in the past. So touch wood, we don't have those kind of pressures. We've got lots of ticks, but it's not an issue. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
Angus, this is not a question. It's a comment. People, I got an email from Hendrik Smith of Grain SA that told a story about Angus. The reason for my inviting him is that I think that big farmers and small farmers, every farmer, must start thinking out of the box. How many of us have done the same thing year in, year out, like with some scientists? They have 20 years of research, but 1 year of figures. And I encourage you all to think out of the box. And where you see farmers adding value to their products, they start making money. They start dictating what they want for their product. And chaps, that's what we've got to do. Thank you.
I don't know if there are any other questions, but it's almost 9:30, and it's time for Warren to come online.
I'm just thinking and dreaming aloud here. I come from Lesotho. I think of myself as a Mosotho, and our problems in Lesotho with the livestock and the problems we have to keep the animals off our fields. And I would love to dream with my team on this. How can we incorporate maybe the livestock into systems of intensive grazing? And we've got the most wonderful electric fences. They're called shepherd boys. And they walk with the cattle every day. And I'm just wondering, is there any way how we can learn from your experience and take it to a rural area and maybe transform agriculture that way, because all the dung ends up in the kraals and it's useless there, but it actually needs to be on the fields.
So August, again, I can't specifically help you with that issue because we have got quite a small farm. We have to use movable electric fences. However, there's a brilliant example of using shepherds, and that is in Zimbabwe. It's the Dibangombe project, which is next to Wangi Nature Reserve. And if it's all possible to go up to Dibangombe, it's a deeply moving experience, because to get to Dibangombe, you've got to drive through Wangi, the game reserve. And Wangi has been shired, there's no other word to use it. You go across the so-called boundary into Dibangombe, and you just cannot believe what they've done there. The grasses are almost as tall as your head, the water's running in the rivers, and it's all done through exactly that. They move the livestock concentrated with humans. Yeah. So it's the Dibangombe project, and it's part of the Savory Institute. But if you just Google Dibangombe, it's amazing to go and experience that. But August, you know, I've had visitors from the Transkei, and as I say, we almost have visitors every day, and it's a big mind shift for people to go, I can't crawl my cattle. To have everything movable, and for many people, it's a bridge too far. They just rather gooi the chemicals from them being in a kraal than actually moving them. And then, of course, livestock theft is a big problem. You know, we unfortunately currently live in a very criminal society. We believe it'll change, but so livestock is a big security is a big problem. Okay.
Thanks, Angus.
Thanks, guys.
Right, what a mouthful from a young farmer. Thanks, Angus. Thank you very much. Right, guys, we're going to, our next speaker is not really going to be the speaker. That is Warren Park, that is supposed to be here from New Zealand. We're going to show a video. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask questions, but I have to repeat the questions because he's going to be live streaming to answer your questions. So yeah, it's going to be a bit of a different way of doing things. So bear with us. Hopefully it won't go down with any hitches. So we're going to be showing the video on the two big screens on the side and on the other side ones, and then I'll come up and ask questions.
Good morning. I'm genuinely sorry that I'm not able to be with you this morning. You know the background and the reasons. And before I start my presentation, I do want to thank you, Richard and Sandra, for all of your help. You've been fantastic, and we did a lot of preparation and had everything in place until I turned up at the airport. However, this morning I'm here to talk about, is there a correlation between sustainable farming and no-till conservation agriculture and conserving environmental resources? I intend to overview this by first standing back and look at what's happening at a world level. So while we need to act locally, we also need to be conscious of the things that are shaping the future for agriculture and forestry. I'll also want to talk a little bit about what's happening in New Zealand with respect to our biodiversity and natural ecosystems and in relation to forestry. There are some long-term trial results from different methods of cultivation in New Zealand, including non-till, that I want to share with you. And I want to introduce you to the cross-slot drill, which was developed here in New Zealand and now is being sold for non-tillage purposes globally. Finally, I want to wrap up by reflecting again on the question posed regarding conservation agriculture and resource use. So let's have a look at some of these global drivers. They're on the screen before you. It includes population growth and demographic change. So while some countries' populations are continuing to grow rapidly, such as India and on the African continent, other countries are experiencing population decline, such as Japan and in Russia. There's also increased trade between countries and also people movements, both in terms of refugees and migrants, but equally in terms of people moving from one country to another to establish new lives. There are huge changes in science and technology, and I'll allude to some of those this morning. The license to operate has been altered by social media. So there is a lot more focus on what businesses do, and if they're non-compliant with the public's expectation, that poses challenges for them and can damage their brain. Water is a huge issue, not only here in New Zealand, but globally. We're actually entering a phase of water deficit, and water use efficiency becomes a critical issue. And finally, there is climate change. All of this happens in the context of a world population moving towards 9.5 billion by 2050. That means that we're going to have to increase food production by 70% and fibre production from wood, trees, by at least 300%. The latter is often overlooked, and we will have to generate this extra food and fibre from less land and with less water. In other words, we're going to have a step change in technology as well as a huge increase in the efficiency with which we use resources. We know that our ecosystems are under pressure, and here in New Zealand, I just want to illustrate that in relation to our birds. We've just had a report produced that indicated that 4 out of 5 of our 168 species are in trouble, and some are on the brink of extinction. That's due to land development, which removed habitat or modified habitat to the extent possible. It's also due to the fact that predators have been introduced, such as cats and possums and stoats and the Norway rat. I'm privileged to be on a company called Predator Free 2050, which has got the task of eliminating these top 3 predators: possums, stoats and weasels, and rats, and we also tackle cats. The point is, introduced species and biosecurity incursions are causing challenges to our ecosystems. We can reverse the damage, but it requires a focused effort. The challenge is exacerbated by the fact that climate change is occurring. And as President Obama, quite a contrast to the current situation, noted, no challenge poses a greater threat to future generations than climate change. And we can see that in relation to New Zealand's context. The Paris 21 agreement, for which there were 175 signatories last November, aims to keep temperature rises to less than 1.5 degrees by 2050. The current contribution of emissions reductions are expected to result in a 2.5, 2.7 degree rise in temperature by 2050. We can see here on the chart that New Zealand's temperature rise, even by 2035, is likely to be about 0.7 to 1 degree warmer than what it is now. You imagine your own body experiencing a temperature rise of that magnitude. It certainly will impact ecosystems. We will see drier conditions on the East Coast. We will see more storm events, more cyclones, and we just have to reflect on this past week with Houston, Bangladesh, and here also, I understand, in Africa. New Zealand's target is to reduce emissions by 30% by 2000, relative to 2005 levels, or 11% below 1990. Under the Paris Agreement, there are 5-year reviews, and in order to meet that 1.5 to 2 degree target, more emissions reductions will be sought from countries such as New Zealand. One of the solutions is to plant more forest. For example, if New Zealand was to establish 1 million hectares of additional forest, we could offset some 28% of our total emissions by 2030. So this context brings to mind Albert Einstein's quote, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results." We confront a world that's changing. The climate's changing, populations are changing, security's changing, and we need to have new thinking introduced into agriculture, the food and fibre supply chains. There are some great examples. Consider this: synthetic food and the Impossible Foods Impossible Cheeseburger, all made from plant. And also, that manufacturing of that product is now printed through a 3D printer. So you can order just in time your hamburger, perfectly presented, excellent taste, low environmental footprint, virtually no emissions. radical change in food production that is accelerating. We also see it in dairy with synthetic milk. In forestry, we're migrating from forests from timber production and pulp and paper to a bioeconomy, new biomaterials. So every product that can be made from fossil oil can equally be made from the materials sourced from trees, plastics, and so forth. So now we think about forests as being the oil fields of the future. Renewable forest, plantation planted. And in that respect, New Zealand is a world leader. We established our first large-scale plantation forest in the 1930s, some 100,000 acres. Now we have 1.7 million hectares of radiata pine, principally radiata pine, that are harvested at 24 to 30 years of age. They store greenhouse gases or carbon, they protect biodiversity, they stabilise land, they reduce flooding, and they contribute to our third largest export earner. In the future, we should not overlook the importance of forestry, even though it causes tension in relation to water use. The other aspect of climate change, but also pollution of the environment, is the introduction of markets where the polluter pays for their effects. And in New Zealand, we have introduced an all gases, all sectors emissions trading scheme. At present, it does exclude agriculture, but all of the oppositions except the current government are planning to bring agriculture in. That's significant because 49 to 50% of all of New Zealand's greenhouse gas emissions are sourced from livestock agriculture. You can see the prices for New Zealand carbon, what we call New Zealand units, is up around $17, $18, and the trajectory is to move towards $50 by 2030. So carbon pricing, the pricing of pollution, is going to help to incentivize behaviour change by those that are causing the adverse effects on the environment. The counterfactual is that those that look after the environment, those that conserve water, those that store carbon, will be beneficiaries of this change. So we will see this transition to ecosystem services markets and the pricing of what economists call externalities over the next decade begin to accelerate. We will also see an acceleration in the use of precision technologies, essentially driving greater resource use efficiency. Things like drones and drills on your tractor that are connected to GPS that read the different types of soils, alter the sowing rates, etc. You're familiar with it, but we're going to see, powered by the internet, you'll notice the little diagram up on your left-hand side, how smart connected products are transforming competition. That's true in agriculture and fibre forestry as well. In our case, when I was at Scion, we were using remote sensing to count the number of trees in the forest. We could determine their shape, as you can see in one of those pictures, and we could manage the forest more precisely and more productively. The other big change that is coming is performance monitoring of your environmental impacts. And here's a great example from Icebreaker, a New Zealand company for merino. They have what they call a BAA, B-A-A code, which enables a consumer buying an apparel item to scan that and track back to the farm from which the merino wool was originally sourced. The farmers are available on YouTube and describe their systems, and you can gain confidence about the way they've managed their farm properties. We will see more third-party verification and authentication of environmental claims. And I was privileged when I was CEO of Landcare Research to be involved in establishing a new certification scheme for greenhouse gases called Carbon Zero. If you want to follow that up, you can read about it in the website here under Enviromark Solutions. The axiom is true. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So one of the things that's going to drive improved environmental performance, improved use of natural resources, is the ability to measure and manage them actively. The other concept that is developing is a progression towards what is called a circular economy. Your waste becomes somebody else's opportunity to generate a new product. So waste reduction and waste elimination is the target. The aim for manufacturing in UK by 2050 is to have no waste. And we see leading companies like Procter & Gamble and Unilever and others, the Plan B group, that are actively looking to eliminate their waste. And you in agriculture can do likewise. The manure provides a source of methane, provides a source of nutrients that can be used and reduce the adverse effects on the environment. As well, we're seeing in the circular economy green walls, roofs, and also incubators where plants are grown 24/7 under controlled conditions for vegetable production and so forth. So again, lower environmental footprint or co-benefits generated such as green roofs in cities. I also want to mention about the importance of gene technology, because this is very significant. Fundamental improvement in the water use efficiency of plants, the nutrient use efficiency, the efficiency of animals is driven by genetic improvement. And we have a new set of tools called gene editing, enabled by CRISPR technology, for example, that enables us to precisely identify the genes that are controlling traits of commercial interest for us. They're not transgenic, in other words, they're not a GMO in the sense that people associate genetic material from a different organism being introduced to the species of interest. This is done within the genome, and it offers great potential to improve the efficiency and the productivity of agriculture. We also have a migration to thinking about the way that we use our land more, not just at a farm scale, but at a landscape scale. So we're designing the landscapes and we're integrating different types of enterprises, forestry, pasture, cropping, into that landscape to maximise the use of the natural resources and minimise the impact. And there are great tools becoming available, no doubt many here in South Africa, that enable farm and catchment level planning. Here you can see in the top a 3D dimensional picture of a Waikato farm. That's about 100 kilometres away from where I'm speaking today, which is enabling the farmer to identify best land use for particular purposes and to control water runoff and to establish biodiversity, native species planting, forestry in places which will not necessarily reduce production from the pastoral system, but will enhance outputs overall. And we need to take a long-term view. Here in Rotorua, the target is to reduce nitrogen leaching into the lakes by 2032 by 170 tonnes per year, almost 45% of the current level of nitrogen going into the lakes. Here we can see where planning has occurred for a 2050 scenario, and you'll notice the changes in land use over time to lower leaching activities. And of course the challenge is to change your enterprise mix while at the same time retaining farm profitability. Internationally, we see many examples with co-cropping and multi-cropping. In Brazil, where you've got different species, you can see that on my right. Also, you can see in India where wheat and trees are grown together, and here in New Zealand where ginseng is grown as an understory crop with radiata pine. So, the world is changing really fast. Natural resources are under pressure, the climate is altering, and we need new ways of thinking to design our systems in order to retain profitability and use water and soil on a sustainable basis. And here I want to switch to talk about some of the trials in New Zealand. The Foundation of Arable Research, and I want to acknowledge the CEO, Nick Pike, for providing me these slides, is a levy-based organisation. In other words, the arable producers, of which there are some 2,700, pay a fee on crop harvested or seeds purchased, and this goes towards applied research and technology transfer. FAR undertakes research on behalf of for farmers or buys it on their behalf. They have established a long-term trial at a place called Chertsey in the South Island and also a counter in the North Island. Now they have over 10 years of data, and they run regular field sites at field workshops for farmers at these sites, as well as generate best practice manuals such as the one you can see before you in relation to farm environmental plans. In relation to cultivation methods, you can see here on the screen different types of tillage where there's ploughing, 2-pass top down, 3-pass top down, and no till, the John Deere disc drill and the cross slot drill. And you notice that on the outside column, on my right is the soil disturbance rate, which is a measure of how much the soil is turned over. And on this next chart is the yields under those different treatments for the last 3 years, 2013, and just to illustrate, for wheat, peas and wheat through to 2015, and under irrigated and dryland conditions. The key take home from this is that no tillage methods were best in terms of yield on the dryland conditions out of 8 out of the 10 years. And while some of those were not significant, the trend generally was for no tillage to perform better, as you can see here, in dry land conditions. It also competed competitively under irrigated conditions, but the differences were not significant. So it demonstrates that under harsher conditions, water constraints, no tillage performance is very good. And under irrigated conditions where water stress is removed, it still performs at a similar level to the other methods. We also see from this long-term trial the benefits of rotation of crops. So here where we have a pasture break, that under all tillage treatments that help to improve water holding capacity. So the take home here is designing a crop rotation, and all of you will be very familiar with best practice in terms of looking after your soils in order to maximise its water holding capacity. So those are the FAR results. Let's now look at cross slot. I was fortunate, I was at Massey University in the 1970s and early 1980s as a young lecturer when Dr. John Breaker and his staff in the Department of Agri-Engineering began to investigate direct drilling, no-till cultivation. And they were interested in relation to introducing new pasture species into existing swards, rather than, say, less so than arable cropping. However, they have extended that, and over the years they developed the cross slot into a commercial company and have worked very hard and now are seeing global sales. They're based in Fielding, and I encourage you to look at their website. The essence of the cross-slot technology is illustrated in this slide. We can see the T-slot, the inverted T, which results in improved water holding capacity, but also enables co-placement of seed and fertilizer, and quite different to the V-slot and the U-shaped slot. Lots of trials have been done with the cross-slot drill. Here's one from Massey University just recently, comparing different no-till methods with the winged opener or the T-slot, having far better emergence of wheat in dry conditions than the other forms. So again, it demonstrates that moisture management in dry conditions is critical to crop success. And that's why cross-slot drills have been taken up in West Australia. Here's a big machine, 9 metres wide in Australia. And in the next slide, you can see a great wheat crop that's been established in West Australia under dry conditions using the cross-slot technology. We also have available cross-slot for small-scale farmers, either pulled by a small tractor or draft animals, as illustrated in the picture here. Again, just to emphasise the importance of soil relative humidity, you can see a comparison in this slide between the different types of no-till disc shape with the T winged cross slot providing the best moisture retention in these two experiments. In conventional tillage, they are also using film, plastic film, to cover the ground, also warms the soil up and may stimulate early emergence. But the question, I guess, is if you can achieve water use efficiency with no-till methods, why would you introduce even a biodegradable plastic into your production system? Just a couple of further shots illustrating the benefits of the cross-slot drill. You can see on your right, side-by-side field trial comparisons in North Dakota, the US, with single disc on your left, and in the next one in Germany, where the cross-slot T is on your left and the single disc on your right. So the evidence seems to be that the cross-slot does perform well in a range of different environments. As well, they have done trials investigating the placement of fertilizer. So in this picture, we have the fertilizer broadcast and then the seed direct drilled with the T-slot. And on the right, the fertilizer has been placed down the chute with the seed and placed in the ground. And obviously far, far better performance where the seed and the fertilizer are co-located. So the summary of the trial results with cross-slot drills is in this slide, and I'm conscious that it's relatively small, but just to read for you, under the fire trials, some 23% increase in yield, 13% also in Canterbury for winter arable crops. In the US, some 13% increase in the New South Wales for soybean, a 30% increase over 13 years. In Marlborough, New Zealand, quite staggering increases. That's a dry summer autumn environment in New Zealand for forage brassicas, 40 to 109%. And with winter wheat, some 17%. Now, my purpose here is not to sell cross-slot drills, obviously, but just to make you aware of the technology developed in New Zealand, well proven around the world. And I understand there is an agent in South Africa. And if you want to investigate further, as I say, look at their website. So let's now try to wrap all of this up. Conservation agriculture and the use of resources. What can we say? It's doing the right thing. It's looking after nature, and as they say, if you look after nature, it'll look after you. The trick, of course, is to keep your bank balance positive. As they say, if you're in the red, you can't be green. So here's some things that are influencing and are positive generally for conservation agriculture. Social license. We demonstrate good stewardship of soil. Public acceptance is higher. Traceability and verification of environmental performance is increasing, and you should be able to demonstrate that through conservation techniques that your footprint is smaller. Natural capital counting, which is increasing in popularity, should also favour systems that make better use of natural resources and sustainably use those resources over time. The emergence of polluters pays will also be beneficial for systems that have a lower impact on the environment, and regulations now, because of the adverse effects on water quality, water availability, greenhouse gas emissions, are moving to cause either a tax or a price to be placed on those that cause the pollution, and those that generate the positive externalities, in other words, store carbon and improve water quality, should be beneficiaries. In all of this, I haven't talked much about the most important person, the farmer. And you, being at this conference, exploring new information, are critical to the success of conservation agriculture. Things are changing rapidly. You can learn from your farmer peers, and I notice on your website a lot of that occurs in South Africa. That's great. Farmers respect leading farmers and learn from them. You also need to keep a good eye on the science that's happening not only in South Africa but around the world. We should also expect continuous improvement, but we know disruptive change through the internet, through drones and other technology, synthetic foods for example, is going to increase more volatility into supply chains, and so we need to be more agile and adaptive in our management going forward. So well done for being here, and I encourage that continuous learning, curiosity, willingness to change, willingness to challenge, willingness to explore. In summary, global food and fibre demand is continuing to grow. While it's variable around the world, in South Africa, my understanding is that food security is a critical issue, and food productivity and fibre, let's not forget that, needs to continue to improve. Natural resources, especially water, is under pressure, and that's going to drive changes in production systems and methods. Climate change is altering the weather, and while we can mitigate the impacts of climate change, the clock is already ticking for temperature rises, and we're going to have to adapt to bigger droughts, more extreme rain bombs and weather events. New technology, we shouldn't underestimate the value of that and the benefits that it can bring, and huge investment is going into areas, gene technology, 3D printing, synthetic foods, sensor technology, that's going to help us to use resources more precisely and more appropriately. There will be new systems such as circular economy. Your waste becomes somebody else's opportunity. And new materials from forest, for example, that are renewable, low emissions, low footprint, equal functionality to oil are now available. And finally, no-till farming systems, they're proven, they're here to stay, and all the trends suggest that they will continue to increase in the future. So, Chair, is there a correlation between sustainable farming, no-till conservation agriculture, and conserving environmental resources? My conclusion is an emphatic yes. Thank you very much.
Right, gentlemen, ladies, I hope you've enjoyed his talk.
That very large machine that he was doing, that T-slot, was pulled by a tractor with a large number of tires and looked like a very heavy machine. Is that not impacting the soils in any way? Does he have any indication of whether that is serious or can be a cumulative damage?
I can't answer that directly, but we do know that track lanes do compact the soil somewhat, but what we also know is that larger flotation area from the tyres will reduce ground pressure. So overall, we would expect minimal ground pressure with that configuration, but I'm not an expert in that area, so John Baker and the team would be able to reply on that. But overall, because in no-till you end up with fewer passes, you have less compaction of the soil.
Johan, can I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
While I would like to ask Dr. Warren Parker, the synthetic beef that he spoke about seems to be counterproductive to our farming concepts. I got the impression that he's to a certain effect supporting it, but I personally see it as competition. And he unfortunately didn't listen to Angus's presentation just before his. I would support Angus's view, but I just want to maybe understand correctly his thinking behind the synthetic beef.
All right,
Or synthetic food for that reason.
All right, thanks.
Well, that's a very good question, because really the development of synthetic food is creating a new competitor. It's a substitute, and the attractiveness of it as a substitute is that all of the eating experience, flavour, mouthfeel, etc., can be regenerated in a synthetic food, and then you have lower greenhouse gas emissions because cattle, livestock, on pastoral systems, in particular, belch greenhouse gases, and also urinate on the ground, which then leaches, or can, in certain soil types, into groundwater. So
the claims for synthetic food is that they are much more environmentally benign and give the capacity for complete consistency and reliability of food production. So the question for the leaders in the livestock sector, and this is what's happening in New Zealand with Beef and Lamb, the farmer levy organisation, and Dairy New Zealand is, so what is our strategic response to the emergence of synthetic foods? It has come faster than people had anticipated, and if you look at the amount of investment capital going behind it, whether it's the Rockefellers and other players, there are very significant resources now available to the synthetic food producers. So they are a real competitive threat, and what pastoral and free-range farming is going to have to do is validate their claims, which was in my presentation around traceability, verification, establishing your credence that your environmental footprint is responsible and sustainable over time.
Johan, just a question on the Carbon Zero initiative to manage and offset carbon footprint in New Zealand. Just a few questions. I know there's a lot of detail behind that. The first question is it paying out carbon credits to farmers? The second question is, are they measuring farmers' soil carbon, doing that? And the third question, what funds are they using to pay out the farmers if they do? Where is the funds coming from?
So what Carbon Zero is a third-party auditing and verification. What they do is measure your greenhouse gas emissions, and that gives you the basis for then purchasing credits, such as those available from forest owners, to offset your emissions, or if you're a net positive emitter, to sell those credits. So the basis of this is that you can't manage what you can't measure, and the Carbon Zero is established against the ISO 14064, and there's a new standard which I just can't recall off the top of my head at the moment, which it establishes the appropriate way of calculating a firm's environmental footprint. And in New Zealand, a good number of companies are now measuring their footprint and then buying offsets. Where do they get the offsets? They can come from a number of sources. They can come from clean development projects. They can come from forestry, which is why I highlighted in my presentation that forestry is really critical. For example, in New Zealand, if we planted 1 million hectares more trees, we could offset 28% of New Zealand's emissions by 2030. So trees store carbon, and that carbon can be sold. You have to deal with the issues at harvest, but in some cases, if you're planting species that are indigenous, which is also happening in New Zealand, then those carbon credits continue to accumulate over a long time frame, like 100 years. Then what we have is brokers that manage the transactions, match the buyers and sellers. So if I'm an emitter, a polluter of greenhouse gases, I need to buy credits to offset it. So I go to a broker that has bought or has available and sells on behalf of the foresters or the native forest owner the credits. Now, when it comes to soil carbon, this is quite a challenge, and in New Zealand, soil carbon is not included in New Zealand's greenhouse gas accounting. In Australia, there are public policies to encourage farmers to build soil carbon, but it's actually quite a challenging task to build soil carbon, and you may have heard about biochar and a number of other initiatives. At the moment, it's not accounted for, but on a global basis, the amount of carbon stored in soils is very, very important. And it is something that over time, as the measurement technologies become more robust, that this is likely to be another factor that supports conservation agriculture, lower or better management of carbon stocks and retention of carbon in the soils. Does that answer the question?
If soil conservation is important as we are hearing, should we not be teaching it in our schools?
What we are needing to see, whether it's in South Africa or Australia or New Zealand or wherever, is the importance of sustainability and how to achieve sustainability and do it in a way that enables you to be profitable. So the challenge is, as they say, you can't be green if you're in the red. And the whole challenge of environmental sustainability while you're running production agriculture is to design systems in a way that enable the resources to be sustained. And I agree that that is an aspect that should be incorporated in the curriculum. And there is absolutely no doubt about it, and it is reflected in some of our science curriculum, but perhaps not sufficiently. The challenge of climate change, where we're going to have steps to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, moving to renewable energy, moving to bio-based renewable materials, planting more forests, and use of solar, for example. But there is no doubt about it, as you would have seen in that early slide of mine about the temperature scenarios, that we are going to confront higher average temperatures, and that's going to, and more extreme events, which means that agriculture is going to have to move to adaptation. So what does adaptation look like? If you're going to be exposed to more droughts, you certainly are going to work towards more conservation of soil moisture, better management of your water cycle and so forth. If it's in an area where you're going to have more floods and extreme storms, then you're going to have to think about erosion and other factors. So I agree with the questioner that this is something that the emergent generation, who are going to be 20, 30, 40-year-olds managing the farms in the future and advising on the farms in the future, need to be aware of these matters and help the current generation and the next one coming to adapt to this new reality.
Thanks for the opportunity. If you take any farming operation, it's essentially a factory located out in the geography out there that converts light and sun energy using oxygen and carbon dioxide and minerals to produce a form of energy which we use as food. Now, in this synthetic food production, what are the raw materials that they're using in the synthetic food production, and what is the carbon footprint of those raw materials in order to make sure that the net carbon footprint is much lower?
So that's a very good question, and it is something that the conventional livestock and crop producers are going to have to be very familiar with. So in some cases, like milk, they can be cultured in the vat. So basically the raw materials are provided in a chemical almost mix and synthesized in a controlled environment, vat production. In other cases, like the Impossible Foods, that burger was derived from plant generated proteins. And I am not able to quote off the top of my head what the relative footprint of that proteins from plants versus from animals are, but what we are seeing is the response that they need to get their footprint down. So over time, we will need to see what the relative carbon footprints are, and that it is making a genuine effort to reduce the global emissions. One thing that's very interesting of that is the ability to 3D print food, and that means that we can get better control over inventory, print to order, and also have foods precisely made and so forth. So it's the combination of distributed manufacturing that changes the inventory, changes the supply chain, as well as the raw materials which go into making synthetic food. And at Scion, for example, we had generated plastics from wood fiber that were being 3D printed to make complex shapes, and those could go into things like medical devices, car parts, and so forth. So the internet is enabling this new form of manufacturing, distributed, real-time, and how all of that quite fits together, I think, is starting to unfold before our eyes. And the challenge for agriculture is to anticipate how to respond and work alongside and exploit the new knowledge that's coming from those sources. Thanks very much, and likewise, I would have liked to have been there. All the best for the rest of the conference. I think your schedule and the program that's been put together is fantastic, and you'll no doubt be learning a great deal, and I commend you for it, because it's the people, the managers, the decision makers, the leaders that are going to have the influence on where the direction for agriculture goes. So the better informed we are, the better we'll be able to respond and adapt to this changing world.